Next is Kelly Doyle on Digital Twin. I luckily had a good session this week with a private incubator, and there's a lot of hopes and curiosities around Digital Twin. So I'm always excited to see what the next iteration of Digital Twin is in our industry and where we're heading. So Kelly.
Well, my group did not disappoint yet again. Every time we get into these discussions, we use every single second and run out of time. And today was no different. We were looking at standardization, trying to understand some of the different organizations that are involved, how they're coming together, what they do, and what synergy do we get out of not trying to recreate the wheel all over again. So just to kind of hit some of the high points, we heard from Abel representing the Construction Blockchain Coalition, and he was talking to us about how smart contracts serve as the foundation for that golden thread that we've talked about in previous meetings, this golden thread of data that flows all the way through the model. The blockchain and digital ledgers, create traceability within the digital twin. So that creates connections between things. And because they're doing that, it's protecting BIM and it's protecting the IP and folks, it builds the trust relationship. So we have this digital representation of reality, but it's such a foreign concept. How do you bring trust into it? That's one way to handle that. And then we heard from Dan Issacs from Digital Twin Consortium. It is a relatively new group. It was formed in 2020. They will actually be publishing a definition very soon of what is a digital twin, because if you ask 28 people, you'll get 28 different answers of what a digital twin is. They are tackling this from multiple industries: automotive, aerospace, infrastructure. All of this stuff is ongoing, and there are specific working groups with major organizations leading the charge, from Microsoft and Dell and Autodesk and others, GE. There's just a great amount of effort going on across multiple industries. And the whole goal here is that each one of these industries learns from the other. So it's really a high level communication and collaboration. They gave us an example of this mining company that has actually been able to save $4 million to date, because they realized they were losing 84 tons of ore because of the way their systems were set up. They were shutting down for periods of time for unnecessary reasons. When they built out their entire operation as a digital twin, they found these gaps, they closed the gaps. $4 million actual savings, and it's ongoing. So the savings will just continue. And then Jeff talked to us from buildingSMART International. His real focus there was trying to connect the dots. We already have lots of organizations tackling issues at multiple levels. His point: why reinvent the wheel? Why do at one hackathon what somebody's done at another hackathon? Let's look into what's going on. And that's the great thing about getting the introduction from these organizations. We're getting to see some of what they're doing and the opportunity to learn more about them. Answer why before you can answer how. Why do we want a digital twin? What are we trying to accomplish? We as an industry tend to go after the shiny new toy, and especially with over 2,400 different construction technology tools in the industry, we're awash in tech. So it's easy to go to the how. We're trying to solve the problem before we've even defined what that problem is and why we want to do it. So collaboration and participation is the key. Let's find our ways to get involved in one of these organizations. Anybody, take a look at the videos, learn some more about it. You can get involved in Digital Twin too, because you definitely have a piece in the game. The discussion questions: where do we have living examples we can study? There was multiple examples given. I'll encourage you to jump in the video. A bunch of them overseas, some of them here. Talked about a lot of good examples there. And then, an important question: how do we get some of these small developers, the guy that or guys or gals that own buildings in Charlotte, they've built 3 buildings. How do they learn to leverage the digital twin, the benefits they get, just like the large data center owners who've been doing this for years? So join the video, you won't be disappointed.
Great to have you on the call with the AC Hive, Kelly.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Just to make the connection.
Yeah, that was a great opportunity to talk to folks. I think we had most of the world covered on that call. And everybody was providing different perspectives, but a lot of folks were saying the same thing, which I thought was encouraging. Let's go ahead and just get started here. We've had a number of different conversations now, some at the macro level, some at the very micro and tactical level, and we've kind of bounced back and forth. And one of the things that kind of ties all this together is standardization. So the folks we brought on to the call today as our subject matter experts are going to really give us an overview from a couple of different perspectives there, from their perspectives to kind of frame that out a little bit, and how what they're working on from a standards perspective ties into digital twin and standardization. So just going to throw out some high level bullets here just for us to think about and consider as we're listening to what folks have to say, and then as we discuss after they present their information. So what we really need to work towards is finding a common definition for what digital twin is. What does it mean? And I think we'll hear some different perspectives on that as we go through. We have to understand that we're all speaking different languages, and not just in the verbal languages that we speak, but also in the technical languages that we speak and the like. And we need to find some commonality there. Let's not recreate the wheel. There's lots of agencies that are working on this kind of stuff. So let's not go over the ground that we've already worked on. Why don't we try to find some parallel efforts or some nested standards where you can bring these things together? And you'll hear some of our folks talking about that. Democratizing the standardization. So how do we get the benefit of the crowd to help us advance the conversation and actually advance things, right? And stop sitting here working in the mutual admiration society. Let's broaden it out a bit, right? You'll hear some folks talking about that a bit. And then container versus schema versus database versus common data environment. This is a bigger picture part of the conversation, but again, something we can talk to as we get into the discussion phase. Listen for some of the input as folks are talking. How do we learn from the things in our past to advance the ball? Abel, could you start us off and kind of give us some background from your perspective, give folks some idea where you're coming from and how that ties in with the work you're doing with the blockchain and some of the academic work that you're doing in this space?
Right. Yeah, I have a short presentation. I don't know if you want me to share the screen, or I can just talk.
No, go ahead and share the screen so that way folks get to see it, and let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Okay. Very quickly, I'll be as brief as I can. Yeah. So I'll be talking about the rise of bSMART legal contracts. My background is mainly I'm trained as an architect. Did my engineering doctorate in virtual environments. I'm the founding director of the Construction Blockchain Consortium, mainly because it's linked to my doctorate research and postdoc research. I'm also the Hyperledger member here at University College in London. And I have my design computation platform, and I'm also working quite closely with the Accord project, which is a domain-specific language for computational legal contracts. Look at a number of technologies, and then seeing how they overlap in relation to how we design things and choice modeling, risk and prospect theory and game theory. So the construction blockchain started a couple of years ago, and it's based at UCL for the industry, and is focused on knowledge transfer, research and development, and education and training. And whenever required, we work with people in the industry on proof of concepts, and they can. We generate this new IP, and this IP can be owned by our partners in the industry. They don't necessarily need to be open source. And we also generate a number of white papers. So we had a value letter that was created. The first draft was put out there in 2018, and we just published our finance and procurement white paper in relation to blockchain. This was going to be on finance and procurement, but then we realized it's a very big topic, and we decided to narrow down to cash flow in the construction industry and how blockchain can generate an impact on cash flow in projects. The next two papers for the next year and this year and the year after will be on building information modeling, computer-supported collaborative design, and in 2021 we'll be starting our IoT and operations white paper. So we started drafting our BIM paper this year, but it will be published in our conference next year. And the way we're modeling this process is we generate a white paper, we present this in the British Parliament as evidence, and this leads to a yellow paper, which is a technical paper, and a green paper, which is a environmental impact observation. And we're also liaising with the European Parliament, and we're using this as a mechanism to legislate at UK level, but we're trying to also work with the European Parliament. And the idea is, as we have this cascading papers, you know, the white paper, yellow paper, and so on, we can identify technical projects, and these would be preferentially like open source projects for the industry, but curated and hosted in a neutral platform, in our case, University College London and other partners in the academic world. And this is very much about creating tools, blockchain-based tools for BIM, but also covering the different work streams we have. They are generally speaking, GovTech, law tech, and fintech, and how we can embed this in building information modeling processes. So we are very interested in smart computational contracts and how we can run this in a decentralized application. And we've been looking at UK legislation, but also collaborating with colleagues in the US to see how this can happen in a way that we can leverage efficiencies in design and construction processes. So we're considering fiat currencies, pound, dollars, etc., yen, but we're also considering cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple. And here in the UK, we have this 24 days cycle for contractors to invoice clients and get paid, and also pay the subcontractors. And we're trying to manage this through the build information model, and also fine tune and adjust legal mechanisms so there is no abuse of legal mechanisms when paying contractors and subcontractors. One mechanism that is very abused is retentions, you know, and the government is really with our collaboration in the government, we've learned that the government here is really trying to get rid of retentions in construction legal contracts. So, so this is in our white paper. This is now out there if you want to have a look. We've revised all main reports on blockchain and construction, and I summarized this in this white paper, proposing a roadmap. Yeah, of course, presenting the Parliament, hopefully before the end of this year. So from this study, I'm creating a proof of concept. This is from my consultancy side. This is the work I do myself. And I'm embedding smart legal contracts on the blockchain in BIM 360, for example. I'm collaborating very closely with Autodesk and Bentley Systems. They are both members of the consortium. And we are working to integrate this with BIM processes. And it's something that can be quite disruptive, not only because we're dealing with cash flow and managing accountancy through the build information model, but also it's a very interesting mechanism to protect intellectual property as architects and designers produce their work in BIM frameworks. And of course, this is very, very relevant to digital twin. It has a huge impact, I believe, because if we create this digital thread from the very beginning, when people are designing in the very first stage of projects, it can be the same thread that follows through all the way to operations and the maintenance of the digital twin. So the idea is to have more people collaborating on the second white paper to shed more light on this process. If you want to get involved, we are looking at emerging technologies like this new digital wallet for IOTA, which is a cryptocurrency blockchain for IoT, NEO, and also Hyperledger Bezel, which is an interoperability project. So you can exchange data between a Hyperledger Fabric and the Ethereum blockchain. We have an annual conference. It just happened a few weeks ago. And if you want to get involved, please, so I'm based here in London. I'm based in the Shard. My office is there. But if you want to get involved with the CBC, please go to the website and subscribe, and I can keep you posted on the development of the white papers and the tech we're developing. The idea is to really use blockchain technology and distributed ledger technologies to create this accountability chain and this traceability that we need to have within the digital twin. So at the moment, BEAM, it's a great thing. It's very useful, but when you upload your design in a Accommodate environment, or when people manipulate the BEAM, there is a very real possibility of you losing your intellectual property, or your intellectual property leaking, but also processes are not necessarily as clean as they could be because of multiplication of data, etc., and not knowing where the data came from, not knowing what sort of data set is the right one to be using. So although BEAM is there to avoid confusion in the production of construction data, there is also a very real increase in coordination to get things right. So the idea is to use blockchain to solve some of those problems. Of course, it's not going to solve everything, but we think it's very applicable to some persistent problems in the industry.
Great. Ask a question, Abel? Ask a question.
Paul.
Yeah, your process of working through Parliament, are you working through an all-party parliamentary group, or are you doing this as part of the government?
So the two things. So I'm a member of the blockchain cross-parliamentary group. I'm also a member of the artificial intelligence cross-parliamentary group. But I liaise directly with the Lords in the House of Lords, and I have a number of other contacts in different departments of the government. For example, I have almost like a weekly meetings with the Department of Business, Energy, and Industry Strategy. And yeah, and I occasionally go for a drink at the House of Lords. But this was before the lockdown, so now it's more like a Zoom calls. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very
Yeah,
good.
sure.
Appreciate that perspective, Abel. Dan, you out there? Dan Isaac?
Yes, I am.
All right. I was wondering if you could give us some perspective from the Digital Twin Consortium. Talk about some of the stuff that you guys are doing.
Great. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me. My name is Dan Isaacs. I'm CTO of the Digital Twin Consortium. I've got over 25 years experience in hardware, software, systems, applications, spanning consumer, aerospace and defense, automotive, and industrial. I represented my previous company, which was called Xilinx, to the Industrial Internet Consortium for 5+ years, and actually developed 2 different test beds, one around security claims evaluations, working with Underwriter Laboratories, as well as with a small company out in Spain that they do very high-end CNC machines for automotive components like drivetrains, crankshafts, these types of things. So created a second test bed around that for using machine learning for doing predictive maintenance in smart factories, and went from early lab stage to pilot to actually full manufacturing, and they're in automotive production companies, manufacturers today. So back in the middle of May, when the Digital Twin Consortium was founded, the executive director of the Industrial Internet Consortium contacted me and asked me if I wanted to come on board and really drive the Digital Twin Consortium. So very, very recent in terms of timeframes for consortiums, about now going on roughly the 6th month. And we started with 4 founders, and we had about 25, 30 companies. 6 months later, we now have 8 founders. I'll go into this, and we have over 160 companies as members. So just tremendous amount of growth, and continuing. And I think it's a testament to digital twin technology, and how that's being used in across the industry. Now, this was at least started or billed as we would be able to talk about a common definition that I saw, as you had pointed out there, Kelly. We are not at the stage to release that. We're getting very close, but I did do some digging, and I think this has elements, obviously, of the definition that we will be bringing out here in a couple weeks, where this is really more of a standard definition pertaining to the building industry. And the statement was, it's fairly widely accepted today: virtual replicas of physical building assets connected to data in and around them, delivering the unique value at the different phases across the entire life cycle. From the design through demolition. I would also actually say, and this came out of one of the sessions that we had within our members, our working groups, so I said, I actually do it in the early stages of the planning. So I do that before I even go out and spend any type of money on any physical asset. I'm using this in advance. And so we reflected that in the life cycle. So just to talk about some of the challenges that we've been hearing from the different members as well as the customers is interoperability. No standardization definitions. You can ask 10 different companies, what is the definition of a digital twin? And you will get 10 different answers. Very difficult to apply, as you just saw, across that entire product life cycle, and then how to interoperate between those. We have, and I'll cover this in a little bit, about the composite digital twin, or the system of systems, and how that's actually represented. And then also breaking down the data silos between the different areas, especially relevant to the construction, but a lot of different areas that we've been seeing, a lot of market confusion out there, limited use cases, practical use cases that really demonstrate what is the value of the digital twin, what is that bringing to me, what is really the business outcome that I'm able to recognize that is compelling enough for me to go and start this journey. And that's really what we're talking about with these high stakes, going down a digital twin, the path of a digital twin. Yes, it is a journey, and there is investment required, money, people, time, equipment, resources, but if you get it right, the payoff is tremendous, and I'll go through some of those examples. So how does the consortium really address these? How is it looking to help improve the interoperability through both investigation in terms of the entire platform stacks, including open source, open standards, help to accelerate the market and provide guidance based on the collective best practices and the knowledge base of our 160 plus membership. And then being able to, as I said, showcase these innovations and demonstrate the value, the transformation that's able to be recognized through this. So who are we? Again, trying to look at these different areas. The Object Management Group, which is a standards body, is the umbrella organization. And the last consortium they've done, the Industrial Internet Consortium, I think it's on its 7th year and still going strong. Very, very impressive. In terms of what they've been able to accommodate, focused on, again, the industrial internet and what does that mean in terms of connectivity, in terms of safety and security, and then show that in the different areas and the business values. So also having a software quality, as well as now with Digital Twin Consortium, as I said, started up back in May. So the founders, Ansys, Autodesk, Dell Technologies. So through CTO representation, there all these members are on the board. In fact, some are on the Industrial Internet Consortium as well as this. So there's a great opportunity to collaborate and liaison. GE, so we have the CEO of GE Digital is a member, and the previous CEO of GE Digital is now the CEO of Lend-Lease responsible for digital transformation. And he is actually the chair of the steering committee. And so we have great synergies in those different areas. Microsoft is also a founder, as well as Northrop Grumman. And you can see here the collective, this is old already. We're seeing new members on either a weekly, if not a daily basis, joining in, which is just fantastic. It is a global member-driven organization. So here we have over 26 countries, and we're adding several more coming up in the coming weeks here, but you can see the representation, close to 50% in North America, but then a third over in Europe, and that's continuing to expand, as is the ties with Australia and New Zealand and their adoption of digital twin technology, especially in the construction space. And then also in Latin America representation. So sort of the structure of the consortium is where we have a horizontal working group that's focused on the horizontal aspects of technology, terminology, and taxonomy. You can see that sort of subdivided in terms of security and trustworthiness, looking at the common terminology to provide that common vernacular as you move down into the different vertical working groups. And then also looking at the different types, the common characteristics, the enabling technologies, and then even the, as I said, the platform stacks, where we're looking at the open source as well as open standards, and how this all aligns and brings a consistency and harmonization with the actual vertical working groups, as you can see represented here: aerospace and defense, infrastructure, manufacturing, natural resources. We have just recently added a fifth based on member demand and a lot of outside interest, and that's around healthcare and life sciences. So we're gonna see again significant growth in those areas. We already have over a dozen members as part of that, and several more coming in from the outside to talk about these different areas, especially in this pandemic times that we're living in right now. And then to showcase and highlight all the innovations, the technology, the thought leadership, the value that's being provided through the consortium, through the members' capabilities. We have our horizontal working group for marketing and being able to focus on things like blogs, technical papers, podcasts, all sorts of different associations, videos. So let's look real quick at some of the working groups. This is, as I said, the horizontal working group, the technology, terminology, and taxonomy, known as the 3T, just because that's a mouthful. This is chaired by the Dell CTO office, and also some really innovative startups, talking about CEO David McKee from Slingshot Simulations. Some of you may have seen some of his videos. If you haven't, I really encourage you to. Very, very compelling. And then also from organization that's looking at optimizations across the entire area. They call it a digital twin of organizations, and that's Iman Kalas from Thinkly. So here you can sort of see the divisions of this working group in the specific areas. And again, looking at that trustworthiness, we're talking about not just security, but we're also talking about safety and functional safety. We're talking about reliability and resilience. And these vary, these concentrations vary depending on the different areas. You can imagine, especially in a healthcare, life science, privacy playing a very significant point, as well as the security. And so we see that across the board, and we have a subgroup dedicated to that. I talked about those characteristics enabling technologies. If you think about it from a common characteristic, the lifeblood of a digital twin really is the data. You want to understand what that data is telling you, understand the actions or the insights that you're gaining. You have to have some type of analytics. With those analytics, you have to have some type of connectivity. Now you open up your threat thresholds. Now you want to have that security capability, the trustworthiness, and then you want to be able to access that data and store that data somewhere. So now it's the accessibility. But if you look at each one of these areas sort of as a common characteristic, take one such as analytics, now you have enabling technologies. And what are the new innovations, new capabilities? We have many different companies as members that are part of this and showcasing this across the spectrum or the breadth of the working groups we have. So you can think of the enabling technologies as neural networks, or as augmented reality, virtual reality, or as being able to do pure stochastic, algorithmic in approach. So we're looking at this across the board in terms of these common characteristics, these enabling technologies. These are some that are listed here. But that's really to provide a blueprint as a framework for a reference architecture. We have our technology stack. So we have a team looking at this across the board. And how does that interact from a digital twin system, which we'll talk about more shortly. And then how is that from the virtualization tied into the real world? How do we get access to the data? How do we ensure the security, the trust, and governance of that data? So The twins span many, many markets, and we continue to see new areas and new capabilities on almost, again, a weekly basis, if not more and more papers coming out. So we have the vertical working groups focused on the life cycles, looking at across the board from a use case perspective, because the use case is where we can really demonstrate and see the value. Looking at being able to put this forward in terms of specific, more details. You see an example of this where we actually have a case study and we have selection criteria to identify and ensure that we highlight these case studies in terms of the transformation, transformative value, the significant outcomes in terms of business, and bring out the commonalities, but also talk about some of the differences. Look at that blueprint coming out of the 3T, that horizontal working group, for that reference architecture, but then implement and look at it from a reference implementation specific to each of the vertical working groups. So here you can see this is chaired by Lend-Lease. We have Microsoft representation, GAFCON, who works solely with owners, and really driving across the board, looking at an infrastructure from not just a smart building, but also a smart city. So scaling all the way up, but also looking at the assets associated with that, looking at bridges, looking at roadways, looking at rail, transportation, looking at traffic management, all of these aspects associated with the infrastructure working group. And what we have them working on right now is looking across the board at this product life cycle. Interestingly enough, what's come out is from the overall life cycle of a digital twin, there are differences. There are areas of commonality, obviously, but there are differences between that and when we look at it in the context of a specific vertical, specific asset. And so how do we reconcile that? How do we bring those together is one of the areas that the working groups are focused on. And then how does their case study or use case apply across this specific area? So these are actually subgrouped into the different aspects of the life cycle. And we have opportunities for each of the members to present 15, 20 minutes in terms of what they've been working on, what they're seeing. We've had presentations from this selection. Here you can see from Microsoft, University of Melbourne, talking about their geospatial capabilities. We've had New South Wales state government, so we do have governance included here as well. And then Bentley and other areas and talking about their innovations capabilities. And this really spawns further discussion and helps to bring out areas of, well, you know what you just showed is something that's a piece that I'm missing, or we could work together and collaborate. And so we're seeing this increasing expansion of the ecosystem around that. And I just thought it'd be interesting to show where the growth is being recognized. Automotive and transport, absolutely, but also look at residential and commercial. And we continue to see that increasing. And now while this is North America, you can imagine this mirrored across the key areas and from a geographic distribution. So we talked about the scope, we talked about a digital twin, and then we talked about a system of systems. Well, then we could take that even from a level of composite of composites of these. So it's pretty incredible how we're seeing these build out from, say, smart cities to and townships to specific regions to even smart countries, and having these all connected. This is courtesy through City Zenith. And here's a representation now where this is showing not just a smart city, but an entire country. So how does this apply and what are the different aspects? How do you do a digital twin of an entire country? So you can see here tying in from the local authorities, the people, the infrastructures, and then bring that in all around to the different areas and how do you manage that? So that's another area. This is the Center for Digitally Built Britain, CDBBB, and they are they're actually one of working together as a partnership and liaison. I thought this was an interesting fact where it says by 2022, over 2/3 of companies that have implemented an IoT solution will have deployed at least one digital twin in production. So we're just seeing this tremendous uptick in terms of digital twin technology. Manufacturing is another one of our working groups going forward. And you can see they're looking at across the board, not just simply doing predictive maintenance and understanding this, but also looking from a supply chain perspective. And how is a digital twin being able to help to optimize? If you could imagine 80 different centers around the globe with tens of thousands of products. And how do you prioritize? How do you manage that from the supply, the asset, to the logistics, and how the digital twin can actually provide significant amount of value in that standpoint. Another area in working group is in the natural resources. So this includes both mining, it includes oil and gas, as well as energy and utilities. And going through these different areas, we have the CEO of XM Pro, who's involved in several of the different aspects, but also representing each one of those major areas, oil and gas, as well as mining, and even in the energy and utilities. And this is a recent member that had joined. They actually were watching one of the webinars that we had been giving. We have a list of those at the end of this for those of you that want to learn more. But they reached out, said, you know, we have some interesting things around digital twin. We'd certainly like to come on board and work and build out the ecosystem from that standpoint. So the concept is really to be able to provide a way to have not a centralized distribution of energy generation, or think about it as a grid, a smart grid, but have this more in terms of distributed, and use the patterns in nature, repeating patterns in nature as that concept. So they came up with this concept of a fractal grid, but it's not just about the power generation, it's all about the high performance compute. It's about the communications, the high speed switching, leveraging both wired and wireless and 5G, and then providing that security enclave. And then each one of these would have, as you can imagine, a dedicated data center for that, and locating those in buildings or bringing those together from buildings to cities or towns, bringing that together now, creating this complex, and then linking all of those together in terms of regions, so now statewide, and linking those states together in terms of countries. And this is exactly what's going on right now. And each one of these is all linked through a digital twin. So you can have immediate understanding, you have situational awareness, and continued monitoring, and be able to run these different what-if scenarios in advance of anything to avoid a catastrophic failure. The advantage of having it distributed, you have much greater resiliency, and you're able to isolate very quickly and not affect the larger area of that. So you can imagine attack, whether it's nature attacking a station, or whether it's a cyber attack, or it's a physical attack. You can isolate that very quickly and not affect the rest of the grid. And this has been being adopted in a very large way. There's a prototype already up and running in New Mexico, and now they're building these out into different areas as we speak. Okay, we talked about some of the advantages, the values. This is a case in a mining situation where a digital twin was being used to identify where the failures were occurring, and being able to understand that. It started out as the company coming to them saying, you know, we just want to understand what's happening. So it's more of a condition monitoring. As that extended out, they said, well, we're able to run the scenarios and bring all the different variables and bring this holistic view of all the activities going around and be able to tell you what's exactly happening. And they were able to identify these. So they had this line here is a 50-mile conveyor line, if you can imagine that. Whoops. So 50 miles of that, and they have boards at the end of these. These are multi-million-dollar machines. So when these go idle, they can't get the ore out. They idle the workforce. You can see here the number in terms of the critical areas. Well, within 4 months, they were able to go bring this up, identify these specific issues, and they now were saving them where they were losing basically 44,000 product tons of ore that they could have been due to all these downtime. They were able to deploy this within 30 days and start recognizing this value to now there it's over $4 million that they've been able to save. And that's just on one conveyor. As soon as they recognized that, they said, okay, we want to implement this across our equipment, and we want to implement it across all of our mines. So it's hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about that they're going to be able to recognize as this gets deployed across the board. And not only that, also we're seeing areas where gamification is being used, in this case for safety training. You can't get access to the other, you can't train everybody directly on that, especially in these days. You can use gamification to do that, so you can set these up. So when somebody sees these different elements, they already know how to respond, how to react to them. All right, aerospace and defense, also looking at it from condition monitoring, understanding, you know, the different association with that, but also looking again using gamification to do intrusion detection, run war games, run scenarios to ensure the robustness and the resiliency of either the systems or the areas they're focused on. Also, now what's going on is over in Europe, there is actually a commission that's set up to actually do a digital twin of the Earth. So they can take the land, the sea, the sky, the subsurface, all this data together and run this through and be able to identify specific patterns that are going on. They call this the digital continuum. And this is something that NASA and Jet Propulsion Laboratories, JPL, are also working on. They call it the NASA 360, so they can understand all the different actions. Carbon emissions, what's happening in terms of sea levels, what's the effect in terms of the rising of the seas based on the satellite data coming back from them, being able to project and analyze that. Jump from there, we also are looking, and we have these different areas within on a global basis that we are setting up as branch organizations of the Digital Twin Consortium. So now we can link into the specific areas with the dialects or the local universities, as well as the local companies, and start to bring and leverage the technology and see what current membership now has access to be able to look across these different areas. Here are just some examples of some programs that are just starting up, whether it's in transportation and energy, infrastructure within developing areas in Africa and Ghana. Here, looking at sustainable food, they actually have one of the, I heard, the second largest fisheries in salmon, and how that can be actually looked at from a sustainability and water management, water treatment. And then we have several different regions coming on board. So there's really an entire look from a global perspective that our members are being able to tap into and understand. And that's, I talked about this case study, looking at a use case, coming out with specific areas to really highlight the value and the benefits of digital twin technology, showcasing the innovation, showcasing the value. We have a program that's now starting up where we're talking about it from highlight the thought leadership of the members. So the innovation, the value, and create this platform. So operationalize those use cases or those case studies that are really demonstrating that transformational value, and be able to highlight that and bring that out from webinars, technical papers, all the different areas we could expect. And we call this our Value Innovation Platform Program. Again, thought leadership. And we've had a lot of people that we've talked to recently, and they've said, we've been looking for something like this. This makes a lot of sense to us. And we're starting to see the membership expand as a result of that. So again, really what I wanted to show is just give you an idea in terms of the Digital Twin Consortium, all the different areas, the breadth, the opportunities for influence to really drive the way industry is viewing digital twins and digital twin technology, to tap into this collective knowledge base and become part of the consortium, really, and help to lead and be recognized and bring out your innovations, your thought leadership. For those of you that want to learn more, we have a series of webinars that are already out. We started at the high level here, where we talked about the overview of what the consortium is. Several of the slides I just went through are included. But then we get into more details in each one of the working groups and how they're working, the relationships, what's happening, and activities.
And I appreciate that perspective. I think that gave us a very good macro view of the impact of the digital twin across really multiple industries, and great segue into what you're going to talk about, Jeff, as far as bringing things together and with the things that you're doing with buildingSMART and some thoughts you have around that.
Yes, you are right.
Great, thank you. And we are liaison with buildingSMART, actually.
Yep,
So,
I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well.
excellent. Well, thank you again for your time.
I think one of the things that I wanted to bring to the CPC when I joined, and Nathan and I were talking about this for a long time, is this perspective of understanding that these problems aren't always unique, or that there's lots of people who are experiencing the same problems or same issues or same ideas, and that there's actually a number of organizations that are already out there that are working on these things. And so, when you have efforts like the Digital Twin Consortium, and you have buildingSMART, and you have OGC and all of this, what becomes, I think, really important is to connect those dots before you go off and start something else. I was a part of did a presentation at the AEC Hackathon earlier this year, the first virtual one that happened earlier this year, and I kind of did a reality check in that presentation where I talked about how the AEC hackathons are great and everything, but why is it that I seem to see the same hacks over and over again, and then why isn't it made fundamental change yet in the industry? And I think a large part of it is just being able to understand the context better, and then being able to take what you know or what you've done and connect it in those contexts, and then being able to have a larger impact by aggregating those things at larger and larger scales. So let me click here. Okay. So, this particular group, we've been talking about digital twin, and obviously, as Dan said, a couple components of that, especially from the buildingSMART point of view, are buildings and the urban environment. Now we are getting into infrastructure as well. With the latest version of the IFC schema, we extend that into roads, railroads, bridges, ports and waterways. There's an effort by Poland and China that want to include communications and power. So it is more about the built asset industry, as we say, or the digitization of the built environment, rather than saying, we're just going to worry about buildings. And and as Dan pointed out, there are all these connected concepts, right? Digital twins, smart cities, smart grids, the idea of Industry 4.0, how you can leverage all of these ideas of BIM and GIS, life cycle cost analysis, IoT, and design for manufacture and assembly. And all of these require, digitization to a level that our industry is not used to doing, hasn't been used to doing. We've seen other industries bypass us very quickly. We've taken a long time to try to get to the point where we're at now, which is very frustrating in some ways, but not surprising in others. And we've talked about this before. The reasons behind that. It's cultural. It's deeply rooted. It's there's legal issues. There's all of these things that go on. So, but we also need to recognize that there's already a lot of people sort of tackling these things at multiple levels too, right? The foundational technologies that are there that already exist. But then also those people like the Digital Twin Consortium, like buildingSMART International, like OGC, that also look at it from the end user use case context. So we always get back to more of this idea. I know a lot of times I'm put in a context where it's dealing with technology, it's dealing with what's the latest tech. But I think we have to keep coming back, which is you have to ask the question, why? Why am I doing this? Why does that technology matter? And then you can answer the how. And the technology is the how. The technology is not the why. And I think Dan did a good job in highlighting that is, yeah, we can highlight what all these technologies are, but without an understanding of how they're really, what they're useful for, what we should be using them. We struggle then with that, getting to that point of using the technology. And then you ask the question, why are we so obsessed with the how? And that's because we're awash in technology. This first slide this is just dealing with BIM. This is just dealing with applications that are interoperable with each other to a certain degree using IFC. There's over 300 utilities and applications out there that are able to do that now. But if I expand that idea of built asset industry technology, we start getting into more and more that keep popping up, and the list keeps going on. And in some cases, these companies will overlap in various domains or use case, general use cases across countries. Some of them are global, some of them are not global. But again, for every one company that you see or think of, there's probably at least a couple more dozen out there that are trying to do the same thing, that are trying to break into the market or trying to step on, in with some competition. And this is difficult. And at the same time, we do have standards for technology today. We have a lot of standards that address what I would call the high level use cases, right? Not extremely specific, but dealing with, maybe a bunch of use cases like, build management for computing development systems, or, for things like security and mobile and all of these things. And, what we try to do from the buildingSMART perspective and from all the stakeholders that are involved in buildingSMART is to search those things out and say, well, what are the things everybody else is using that we should be using? And I think, this highlights it really well. And we've had Sala speak to us before from Microsoft and talking about digital twins. And she posted this last week. And I thought it was, a great way of sort of talking about the issue is, well, what's the use case? Why? Answer why first. Right. And I think that's the value of places like the Digital Twin Consortium and the CPC and the rooms at buildingSMART International, is that the end users really have to be coming up with the value propositions in the first place, instead of the technologists. It's not to say that you ignore the technologists, you have to push them to the side, but in some ways they sort of have to wait their turn, right? And I think this is one of the things I really struggled with when I worked for a software company, right? It was, we were very hard on trying to push, hey, you got to buy our software. Hey, we got this great piece of software. This is what we can do. This is what we can do. But the way that you got through to that audience was really answering the question of why, right? Was what is the value proposition? Why do you want to use what we are doing more than we use? Instead, say, why do you want to do what you want to do? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? And then show how the technology then addresses it. And even within, say, these larger domains of smart cities and digital twins and BIM, GIS, there are all these use cases that can, in some cases, these are very high level, that can have multiple, more detailed use cases underneath them. And some of these are, in and of themselves, a very specific use case that can be, developed. And, and this list is long, but it's not fully comprehensive, right? You can keep going and keep going and keep going. And that's why I think it's great when, Dan shows us how, from one organization's point of view, you start, eating the elephant, right? You start dividing it up and figuring out what are the ways that we're going to tackle this idea of how do we define the use cases and how we're going to do it. And they're all connected. And I think, it's another thing to remember is just because I have a solution in one place, or I have a value in one use case, doesn't mean it's not connected to other use cases. If I'm creating information, and we talk about interoperability all the time, how is it that information I'm creating for one particular use case might be used in another? How is the information that I'm building over time, from early design, from planning, going to be used, downstream? How is it collected? How is it transmitted? What are those things that are important, like as pointed out by Abel in the Construction Blockchain Consortium? It's like, people are more and more worried now about how do I make sure that the security of that data that I am creating and transferring is enabled. How do I make sure that it's secure? How do I make sure I'm getting the right stuff? I'm not just getting a packet of information that who knows what the hell's in it. And we're sort of there right now. This is very much what's going on with interoperability in the building industry. Is we're sending information back and forth, but it is not a secure environment by far. And so, how do we change that? How do we make that work? So, going back to this is saying, we have an idea of all these partners, and in many cases, these are all organizations that buildingSMART is working with. And these are organizations that we're working with in particular, that we have formal agreements with. Along with the Digital Twin Consortium, we've been working with OGC for a number of years, and with the World Geospatial Industry Council, because of this whole idea of how do we meld BIM and GIS? Buildings have a context, and how does that context then relate to multiple buildings, and then to multiple regional or municipal contexts? How can that be used then across infrastructure? And then with groups like GS1, ETIM, and E-Class is, we talk about classification. We talk about giving meaning to information. They're experts in doing that already for much of the manufactured product industry. So why aren't we taking the lessons that they've already learned and figured out and applying those in the building industry? And then, of course, people, organizations like RICS, which have a use case that talk about accountancy, that talk about how do you apply and track value to all of these things throughout the entire process of a project. And then, of course, we have the standards organizations themselves. buildingSMART is a standards organization at sort of a small context, right? Whereas ISO and SIN and ANSI are dealing with multiple contexts. But what we do in the cooperation with those is say, well, the things that we come up as domain experts in the built environment, we can then pass along to ISO and SIN and say, our stakeholders, our industry believes that this is the direction to go, and then take it to that next level of ISO and SIN. And so we do that with these different ideas, just like Dan showed with their working groups. We have rooms, essentially the same thing. In fact, we have a new working group called the Digital Twin Working Group, and there are members of DTC that are a part of that, and DTC itself. And they sort of, these rooms are sort of of two minds. One of them is about that expertise domain, right? Whether it's an airport or railway or a contractor in the construction side. Or infrastructure of buildings, but then there's also this idea of sort of the technology side. So we have a technical room that is trying to basically support everybody else by saying, well, what are the things that out there that we should be considering instead of making anything new? When you look at regulatory, it's how can they support all of these other domains in influencing the way that laws and rules are written at the regulatory level, and even use the technology to help automate the process of, code checking and compliance checking and, making all of these things happen that have to happen, right? That ugly stuff that nobody likes dealing with because it's such a pain in the ass with all the bureaucracy you usually have to deal with. So how do we make that better? And as I said before, the idea of digital twin has been around for the exact term digital twin for a while. But I think the concept has run a lot longer, and buildingSMART has taken upon itself last year to start looking at this and start formulating its own sort of ideas about that and how buildingSMART can begin to approach it. And so we do have that Digital Twins working group, and it is led by a gentleman from Haskening DHV. They're a huge contractor and asset owner in the Netherlands and in the world, really. And so, this is a great time, a great opportunity to say, okay, how do we take what we know already about the built environment, about buildings, about interoperability, and providing technology to do that, providing semantic schema in order to do that, and how do we then begin to take that to the next level? And and I think the Digital Twin Consortium also helps in that, because you can't really do everything in one organization. It's impossible to do. So instead, like Kelly likes to talk about product ready being a system of systems. And essentially what we want to create is an organization of organizations, right? Is that we have this network so that we can all begin to focus on the things that are important and rely on our partners then to be working on those other things we think are important, but we don't really have the ability to dedicate to. So this was most recently exhibited in our summit, which wraps up actually tomorrow. And as a part of that summit, we had a whole entire, section. It was 3 hours of the plenary sessions on the first day that was devoted to digital twins. And, different companies, different stakeholders, owner groups giving their perspective, as Dan said, on what do we want out of it? What are we expected to get out of it? How do we move forward? What are those things that we're interested in? Is it different from, market to market from different parts of the world? Or is it generally the same, and now we've got an opportunity to work together and move forward on the topic? And so, again, Sala posted this because a couple of days ago, one of the working group sessions that happened this week was on a new project, a new activity proposal that involves members of the DTC, either directly or Aconex, Autodesk, Bentley. There's lots of these companies that have membership in both organizations, all become a part of these types of projects where we sit down and we say, how do we then deliver on these ideas? How do we create solutions for these ideas? Another example is in the technical room. Every room has a few sessions. And so this is an example where we started thinking about the technology side, right? So we are currently looking at projects about IFC JSON. You know, how can we apply the idea of streaming information to building information modeling? You know, instead of dealing with monolithic files, let's stop dealing with monolithic files, because no other industry deals with delivering information in such huge monolithic packets. The idea of open CDEs, the system of systems again, is if we can have some common standards with the APIs themselves, then we can begin to search across all of these different systems for information. Everybody can keep their own systems. You do not have to worry about making everybody go to one particular CDE or another. And then just improving workflows for people. I'm looking at different serializations like HDF5. How do we deal with large quantities of data? How do we better enable workflows rather than the things that we have been used to in the building industry?
It's supposed to be a roundtable discussion, and it's just 3 retards per.
John? So again, this, you know, digital description, all of these things that we're doing, and I think it's great that these things are occurring. You have the AEC Hackathon. Here's another opportunity for people to get together and sort of look at it from that perspective. And I think, again, you see the same sort of players that are all in these different groups finding opportunities to come together and talk about these things. In the digital twin description language in the tech room, there was a gentleman, Akshay from Microsoft, talked about what Microsoft was doing was the digital twin description language. There's all of these cross-pollinizations that are happening, and I think it's really great because we need to continue to do that. And you know, CPC can be one of them that talks about these ideas of, you know, use cases and what are the things we do from a particular perspective. The Digital Twin Consortium does it from another perspective. And then we begin to have these collaboration platforms, whether it's doing projects on GitHub, it's doing projects through AEC Hackathon and its GitHub. It's, you know, establishing those groups that do white papers and, you know, whether it's the Construction Blockchain Consortium or Digital Twin Consortium. So I think that's, you know, really what I'm trying to get at is, you know, always looking at the larger context and being able to see who's doing what and how they're doing it. And then finding an opportunity and getting in there and adding your points of view and expertise and collaborate in different ways. That we don't always need to do, you know, do something new or not think that somebody else isn't feeling the same pain points and trying to get something done.
All right. Jeff,
Hey, Jeffrey. Oh yeah, or Kelly. This is Tim Spino.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. You know, it certainly looks like, you know, trying to boil the ocean with a lot of this stuff, and you know, I got a question. Is there a project? Is there a building? Is there a campus? Is there a town that like is the perfect example or a really good example of what we're looking for that could be used as a model? Is there anything out there that you all know that we can point to?
I would say I would go back to Mr. Issacs about that.
There are some interesting case studies in, for example, Aachen University. They have like a smart campus. In terms of blockchain implementation, of course, we have Estonia, who has a completely digitalized health system. Over here, we have Open University. Their campus in Milton Keynes has a digital twin as a study prototype, as a prototype that people use to teach and learn. And a few dotted around. Like at a very large scale, I suggest you look at Estonia, because they managed to use EU money really well to digitalize. So the digital transformation is generally a little bit more advanced over there. In the UK, you have parts, you know, public private partnerships like a Canary Wharf Group and so on. They try to implement digital twins. And of course, you have the public transport here in London, you know, the tube, the underground, the overground, the Crossrail. They have interesting digital twins. But it is still quite fragmented. It's like little pockets of tech here and there. Some are very
Jacob's
successful.
waving his hand. Looks like he may have some examples here on this side of the pond as well.
No, and that's the thing, Tim. It's interesting because there are plenty of times that people have done this and implemented it, and it's a little more scarce over in America than it is worldwide. It's much more seen, especially with some of the standards that are deployed. But one of the big things, the problem is the process changes each time, and the deliverable and how you get there and what you do with it is different each time, which doesn't make it a good thing for our industry, which we rebuild the same building the same way every time, but don't learn anything from it. So a lot of these activities and these groups like Digital Twin Consortium, they're trying to get to the ways to standardize the full process, but not pigeonhole anybody into exactly doing it. So an open standard or protocol for delivery of data, really where an owner can actually say, okay, I'm just going to take this document and hand it to somebody and say, this is my deliverable. And it's actually truly something that can be implemented on a project and not just, have to, dig tooth and nail into to figure out how to actually deliver it. But the standardization of saying, point to it and saying that's the way it should be is not there yet because it changes for each project right now.
And I think the other thing, Jacob, it's not just one. So I think that's the other thing that I think everybody, it's kind of like the idea there's only one BIM model. There's also not going to be one deliverable or one standard that you're going to use. And I think that's one of the most interesting things that we've been starting to uncover and explore is say, okay, if I've got IFC over here, I've got the digital twin description language over here, I've got some other IoT deliverables over here, I can actually make them work together. What I deliver depends on the point of view of where I'm at and what data do I have or what data do I need. And then making those work together, I think, it's not that it can't be done. It's not that it hasn't already been done. It's just, as you said, is look at it from a standardized point of view is, well, what are the best ways? What are those open international ways I can do it so that if I'm a contractor and I'm doing jobs over and over and over again, I know exactly what my deliverable is always going to be. If I'm a large owner and I've got facilities spread all over the US, much less the world, I always know what deliverable I can count on to get that I know is going to work. And, and I think we're still working on that and there's still a fight for what that is. But again, I don't think it has to be one. It can be multiple depending on the use case.
Yeah, there are a couple of specifics. You can look at Virtual Helsinki. That's actually done with Bentley. That's they're in the middle of that, but and I think there's two ways to look at this. There's what we call harvesting existing. So a digital twin is done differently if we're harvesting or adapting an existing facility. And a lot of that's happening different than it is on a new construction. I can tell you, I can't name them, but I can tell you there is certain data center owners that are serial owners all over the world that have been doing this for a number of years. And they're monitoring these as digital twins in a single control room in one point all over the world. And they can see the temperature of every hard drive in every data center, So I think bringing it to the less, so sometimes the more influential views are coming from these owners that have a lot more to gain out of it, and that's where we're seeing it get traction.
Yeah, it's now how do we mainstream it, right?
Exactly.
Like those ones that really have done it well, and they do it because they really get an advantage out of it. But how do we mainstream it? So your owner here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that owns 3 buildings, he understands what he can get out of it too, not just have to own billions of dollars worth of data centers.
Yeah, and I mentioned this last meeting, but The fact of the matter is right now in Europe, it's the infrastructure owners that are pushing this harder than anybody. So they have spent, it's almost 10 million euros in money combined to extend the IFC standard to include infrastructure. As I said before, rail, roads, ports and harbors, bridges, tunnels. We have a project here in the U.S. AASHTO wants to standardize on data delivery using IFC and the new bridge standard. So the infrastructure people really get it. Like they really get it, and they're excited about it. And I think in some ways they're learning from all the pains that we've been experiencing in the building industry, and they're going to leapfrog it because they just said, yeah, we understand what we're getting to, but our vision is clear on digital twins. Our vision is clear on interoperability. Our vision is clear on how we want to even change the whole project delivery method, because we need to be able to do more with less over the course of time. And so I'm really excited, more excited about what's going to go on in infrastructure than buildings right now. But don't count buildings out. I'm just saying that there's some big leaps and bounds that are going to happen on the infrastructure side.
So how much is that in looking at a lot of your different slides and the members of the Digital Twin Consortium and stuff like that? How much is the government or the military DoD or the Department of Public Works or whatever? How much is the military getting in this? Because they could be very helpful, right?
Yeah. There's been attempts.
Army Corps of Engineers, right? It's like, yeah.
So in the past, with buildingSMART side of things, we used to have a U.S. chapter, then it went away, then it came back, it's back again. It just reformulated this year. And the interesting thing is that the GSA and the DoD, especially military health branch, have always been very interested, because for them, it's developing those deliverables. And of course, we don't have COBE without the Army Corps of Engineers and Bill East. And now COBE is not just a US thing, it is now at the international level. So that's been taken up to become not just a buildingSMART standard, but eventually it will be an ISO standard. And that's a big deal when you think about it. It's something that was developed here in the States that really addresses this whole idea of ownership and facilities management. And more people, as they've taken it on themselves outside of the U.S., now think it's time for it to be an international standard.
Hey, Jeff,
yeah.
So in all these discussions, which has been very, very good, thank you for everyone for presenting here. There seems to almost to be like an unspoken thing that started, 20 years ago with Little BIM and Big BIM.
Mm-hmm.
Are we looking at Little Twin and Big Twin? Because what happens when you're talking about kitchen blowouts with residential? Does that need to be a digital twin? And when you're talking about, this idea of a standardization so that we can blow this out, where's the limits, right? Is it a square footage? Is it use? Is it cost?
And answer in 2 minutes or less. We have
oh, great. So I'm going to leave the room now.
No, and I think the simple answer is the simple answer. It's just like everything we've been talking about with Little BIM, Big BIM. It does depend on context and use. The fact of the matter is we can generate enormous amounts of data. It's just a matter of what you're going to do with it and how you're going to work with it, and then and whatever system you're going to get, we have the ability to link to as much detail as you want. You can be as deep or as broad as you want to be. I think the key thing is that within our industry is learning how to do that. Other industries have already learned how to do that. We just need to do a better job of learning how to do that, of learning to A, what to ask for, but B, also learn how far do we really want to go, right? And I think that's the one thing the rabbit hole we've fallen down a long time is everybody started modeling and then they just took it way too far without thinking of the consequences and stepping back and saying, well, how far do I really need to go? So,
well said.
As the Digital Twin Consortium, that's one of the reasons I got so involved with it early on, is they do address it. To answer your question earlier about the Department of Defense, the U.S. Air Force is actually chairing the aerospace and defense vertical of that. But there's so much that they've already done over there that I keep saying that I sit in the infrastructure group. I chair the design segment of the infrastructure, and I say, guys, let's go look over and see what they've been doing over there. No, we don't have an aircraft engine. We don't have some of these things, but the principles and the methodologies that they've used, back to Jeff's earlier concept about not reinventing the wheel. That's what I see one of the advantages of this kind of a group coming together to do.
Perfect timing. We have less than 10 seconds. I appreciate everybody's participation today and look forward to more conversations next year. Thanks.
That's good.
Well, the time clocked down, but it doesn't look like it brought us over. So
I guess
let's keep talking until they bring us in. So next question.
I wonder if they can manually bring us in with the new Zoom.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Do we have to leave?
Wait.
Oh, there we go.
29 seconds.
Oh.
So who has the ask and answer in less than 30 seconds?
Not me. I'm out of here.
Don't be afraid to send us questions, folks. If after this you didn't get a chance to air it, Nathan, everybody has Nathan's email. Send it to him, and then we'll circulate it to the group and get feedback from everybody. But appreciate everybody's participation. That's what really makes this.
If there's one thing,
the room, but no,
I thought it did too. But I see some new players here, so we're back in.
Yeah, we're back.
I want to hear how all the VR people enjoyed their session.
Yeah, they must have.
Sorry, we got a little bit lost in time, and I noticed the thing that said, "Oh yeah, 75 minutes went by," but I didn't click the